And boom, welcome to the podcast, Joy.
Hi, thanks.
We got it all recording, and I know you have a piece to share with us.
I do. And so this first one, I'm just going to read off some excerpts from a short story that I wrote. And I've actually never had a reading of this before. So this is the first time I'm actually going to be reading this out loud.
Cool.
But just like some context, it's called Shaking Earth, and it's part of a soon-to-be short stories series, hopefully, if I have enough time to keep writing. And yeah, so this first one, the context, it's based in San Francisco. It's based on my mom. It's nonfiction, so this is all real-life events. It's her in San Francisco around the earthquake time. So just like a small clip of it. Okay, so 2 months after birth, the San Francisco earthquake of 1989 struck in October, decimating the Bay Area to piles of rubble. Yuming was working in a basement sweatshop around the corner of the old International Hotel in Manilatown. When the quake struck, the old ceiling of the basement began to crack, crumbling into pieces, crashing down in chunks of old clay and clouds of dust. Sparks flew from electric sockets. Piles of unfinished coats and shirts slid down from tabletops, and chairs skidded along the shaking ground. Hanging lights flickered and swung violently overhead before giving into a complete blackout. Terrified, Yuming took cover under a stairwell as other seamstresses quickly scrambled out of the basement. When she peeked out from under the stairs, everyone was gone. Crouching in the dark, she came to realize her surroundings, and her thoughts immediately jumped to her children. Is the baby okay? Where's Yola? She was feeling her way through the darkness, hands moving over piles of dust and debris for her phone. Yuming's mother was watching her 2-month-old newborn at home, and Yola should be at her mother-in-law's flat in the Tenderloin. She picked up the phone and met a dead line, no dial tone. In disbelief, she hung up the receiver and tried again.
Thank you. Snaps to that. So, okay, so spoiler, I know the whole story. Right? I read the thing. Okay, here, let me move this down too, so it's not like in your face.
Oh, thank you.
Actually see who I'm talking to, right? So this is part of your series that you are planning on continuing, called High Tides. And then the purpose of it. Could you give me a little bit in terms of like the overarching like synopsis of the series, like what sparked it? Because right now I know you're talking about your mama, Yuming.
So with my mom, I've only gotten closer to her as an adult because we didn't really get along when I was a teenager. But it wasn't until after actually listening to Someday by Ruby when she was talking about her mom on that track, and she was kind of telling stories about her mom's struggles and chronicling that, especially about her mom. And it made me think of my mom. And at the time I was reading The Joy Luck Club for the second time as an adult, and revisiting those stories, and kind of this reoccurring theme of mother-daughter relationships kind of hit me really hard. And since I'm not in the same city as my mom right now, she lives in San Diego, I don't get to see her often either. And as a kid, I was able to interview my mom, and it was one of those school projects, like interview an immigrant. Like, okay, cool. And a lot of people interviewed their parents, and I did the same. And I ended up sitting for 2 hours with my mom, crying with her because she was sharing her whole life with me, really, of when she grew up in a village in China. She had an arranged marriage. When she came here, she didn't know the language. She didn't know the streets. And she really spelled everything out for me, and what her dreams were in struggling as an immigrant, and not knowing her surroundings, and then having children in a world where she didn't feel welcome, right, in this country. So I just felt compelled to be able to not just write my own stories, but to share the stories that kind of came before me and that I'm a part of, because my mom and my grandma have been through so much to provide for us, and are still so supportive of me as a writer. And when I told my mom, hey, I'm going to write the story about you, is that cool? And she was like, yeah, sure. And so when I interviewed her as a teenager for that project, after that 2-hour interview was done, I was leaving her room. We were both wiping our tears, and I was leaving her room, and she said, tell my story, let the world know I was here. And I think she felt like many others, a sense of invisibility too. So it's important, it's personal, but it's also very real. So yeah.
Yo, there's a lot in there to like unpack.
Yeah.
It's kind of dope first when you're saying that you were inspired to go through and write this piece because of Ruby Ibarra's album.
Yeah.
And how it sparked there.
Right.
Okay. Can I just get some like overall context?
Okay.
Right there. I like this like speed round because it'll help me kind of form certain questions that I want to really understand and give a better context of you within this work as a writer, as an artist. All right. So speed round. You were born
San Francisco.
1989. 1989. I also like to call this, I was thinking about it the other day, the speed round identity theft section.
Okay.
So we can get as much as information.
You know, there's actually like a real credit fraud thing happening right now, so this is very real. Yeah.
I know. There's so many. There's so many. Okay, but and then which district? Which area?
Like where I grew up?
Yeah.
I lived in Crocker, Amazon, Outer Mission my whole life. I'm living in Excelsior now, but I went to school in Chinatown, Fisherman's Wharf, and Bayview Hunters Point.
Oh, dang. That's like all over.
Yeah.
So you are SF native immigrant, as Role would talk about, right?
Right.
And then you went to school in SF State, right? Mm-hmm. And then what did you study there?
Asian American Studies.
Asian American Studies. And then could you give me an overview a little bit about your kind of organizing work? Because I know that you have been active in like the Manilatown Heritage Foundation. Is that right?
Yeah, I was at Manilatown for about 2 years after finishing up at SF State. At SF State, though, on campus, I was really active with PACE, especially for about 5 years or so. Getting to teach workshops, peer-to-peer education, and also working with Manilatown. Was starting to volunteer with Manilatown and bringing that to SF State as well. So we did screenings of the fall of the I-Hotel. And yeah, a lot of PCN, a lot of student-run events.
You just told me you did PCN for 5 years?
Yeah.
That's legit.
3, 4, 5,
That's legit.
Give or take a couple.
And then you were also part of Barangay Dance Company.
Barangay Dance Company.
Okay. So your mama, she's from China.
Yes.
Where's your papa from?
China.
And then did they meet here?
No, they were actually in arranged marriage in China. Yeah.
In China?
Yeah. And then they immigrated here in 1981.
How did they immigrate here? Like, what was the concept in terms of the post-1965, the preference? Was that it?
I'm not entirely
Or
sure.
is it for work? Like, did they have family?
I think it was through family.
Oh, so there was already family here.
Yeah, my paternal grandparents were already here.
Oh, how did they get here? Do you know?
I never asked that far.
The immigrant story, right?
I'm much closer on my mom's side than my dad, so yeah.
And so this is what I want to ask. It's interesting how when you listen to Ruby Ibarra's, it also sparked a desire for you to go into your own immigrant family's history and like tell that story.
Yeah.
From this arc though, how did you get involved with the Filipino American community and the activism in that sense? Coming from, you said you went to school in Chinatown, coming from a ethnically Chinese American background.
I think for me, it all kind of ties in together with reading and writing because I spent a lot of time reading books as a kid, right? So whether I was, in Chinatown or wherever I was, I always ended up at the library and I always ended up reading fiction stories. And as a teenager, I liked to write. I started writing poetry at a young age. And so it was always a sense of reading stories and storytelling. And so that was always with me. My mom's stories have always been with me. It was a matter of carving out the time to really write it down and share it with people. What was it? The other part of your question?
So, like, as a Chinese American, do you identify as Chinese American? What do you like to label yourself in this?
I've come to identify as Asian American.
Asian American.
Especially as a young preteen or teenager and going through a really rough time at home. I didn't really have a safe space to go to. So the safe spaces that I ended up in were Filipino American spaces, namely Filipino Youth Coalition at Thurgood Marshall. Kim Fuentesilla, shout out to Kim. Yeah, so she was my advisor, and she really got me through a lot of rough things in my life, you know.
Hey, shout out Kim. That's like the line, because it's Kim to you, and then I know Francis is there, and then he ended up teaching in the same room that Kim Fuentesilla was at Denman. Dang, okay.
So Kim really provided a safe space for me, trying to understand my relationship with my family and with other people as well.
This was at Thurgood Marshall?
Yeah, Thurgood Marshall. And
was this an after-school program?
It was like a lunchtime club, you know, where students could go to. And she was really passionate about sharing bits about Filipino culture, and like she actually brought in Barangay Dance Company to teach dances at the time, so like coming full circle, and then I joined Barangay afterwards. But so I was exposed to Filipino American history. I was exposed to spoken word. I was exposed to all these different things, right, that helped me kind of grow and gave me an outlet of expression to kind of channel my angst and my anger and confusion, right?
Hey, we still need to see those teenage poems.
Oh no, leave them in the dust, leave them buried. But yeah, so I was very thankful for that, and it was also through that same space that offered opportunities to go visit SF State and see what colleges are out there. What can you do as a college student? And so not just safe space, but also being offered opportunities to grow as a person, and then looking forward as a high school student, like what do you want to do next? And even after leaving Thurgood and going to SF State, I found myself still with a lot of similar friends, and they were also into PACE and doing Filipino American cultural activities and learning about different issues. And so, I mean, I already had an interest in it from, you know, being in FYC, so why not? And it ended up interning at PACE, and then that led to other positions of leadership, and that was kind of like a continuation of kind of diving back into the expressions, like the outlets of expressions that helped me get through high school. And so eventually over time it became, you know, wanting to give back to the community that raised me and nurtured me, you know. And then at SF State, it was through PACE and LFS that politicized me. So really understanding the world around me and having Asian American studies come in and giving me a language to articulate what are the things that are happening to my community and within myself and my own identity, and then my involvement in my role. So yeah, like being I do identify as Chinese American still, but having this involvement in the Filipino American community really changed me, you know, and I think it really saved my life. So, and it's not just being Chinese American, it's not just I now identify as Filipino American, because it don't work like that. Because, you know,
we see racial dollars already,
it don't work like that.
In all the dance companies, who knows, right?
Right. But yeah, so I mean, identity is fluid and it's constantly changing. So I choose to identify as Asian American because that term is also a very political term, and it wasn't coined until, you know, the like 60s in the Asian American movement for ethnic studies and all this. So it's a very, like, Asian American sometimes is a box you check. For me, it's a very loaded term that I choose to identify with. Yeah.
It just makes me think the beauty of finding a community and finding like organized, established groups that are working collectively to do something, and then you finding a space in there. Because it makes me think, I grew up in predominantly Latino, and it was like a mix of Asians in LA, and then coming to Palo Alto, it was predominantly white community, right? And then you would see a lot of people trying to be part of like the larger group, right? Whether a Filipino trying to be accepted into white community, right? But this is so interesting because it's a ethnically Chinese American, but finding a space in a Filipino American community, and that's a predominantly community of color, right? And then just the implications of that, where you're not necessarily identifying with the larger, predominantly white mainstream culture, but it's a culture of a minority. But because of the organized spaces that are able to bring these leaders and, like Kim, connect them with the youth in order to guide, you said it saved your life.
Right.
How come it saved your life? What do you mean? What can you think about that?
For me specifically, like my family life was always really, and I never really talked about this in public, but I've kind of shared it through my art, my spoken word throughout college. But my family had gone through a lot. There were a lot of mental health issues, myself included, struggling with mental health for a really long time, and I think having having someone to listen is important enough, and then also them offering you a safe space, and then here's a way to work through that, right? Here's a language to work through that. That's different. That's transformative. And so for me, like when it comes to identity, if I didn't want to be at home, there was nothing more about being Chinese American that I wanted to learn, and that's how I felt as a youth. But the more I learn about the Filipino American community, the more I'm compelled to learn about the Chinese American community.
Yes.
But it's also, it's a weird reality that my network, like 99% of my network is Filipino American, right? Yeah. So when sometimes people ask me like, well, can you reach out to like Chinese American folks? And I'm like, I don't know, I might know a few people here and there through like organizing, but like really, my world has literally molded into a very Filipino American community centered.
It makes me think, because you know how they have those adopted Filipinos, but usually they're white. They're like a white guy who's like, they love and I'm now cooking chicken adobo.
Right.
Like there's a video that popped off like so crazy, and they're so happy that it's like, look, we got a white guy to identify as being Filipino. Right. And then it's kind of...
And then he speaks Tagalog and everybody goes crazy. Right?
Yeah. There's actually a few videos.
Yeah.
They love that.
Yeah.
People love that, of the like, look at the white people.
Right.
And I mean, it's cool. It's good that they're trying and they're learning. Some learn pretty well. I saw these group of like, I think they were Mormons or some form of evangelical group that went to even Visayas, and then they spoke Bisaya and better than me, right? And I'm part Bisaya. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta get on my game, fam.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see these adoptions of people and then having them feel good, and it's kind of beautiful to see, because from what I know about you, you've been active. You've been active in the communities, and one that the very first time I met you, right, was because you were going to bring the Denman Middle School youth around to the I-Hotel.
Ah, that's right. Okay,
and then you were going to like tell them a little bit about I-Hotel and everything. And could you tell me a little overview of the Manilatown, your involvement with that, and what... You can give us a little historical context of that, because I think that's a very important thing to highlight in SF.
Yeah, sure. So Manilatown used to be a 7 to 10 block Filipino community. After World War II, a lot of Filipino migrants, migrant laborers from the canneries, the farm workers, a lot of them settled in I-Hotel, and some of them lived there seasonally. So there was a lot of movement along the West Coast, and the I-Hotel was a stop for a lot of that. So in that community, you had barbershops, pool halls, restaurants, businesses that really thrived. And after they started building the BART system in San Francisco and the financial district, redevelopment kind of took over, started chipping away at the blocks of Manilatown until the I-Hotel was the last building standing, and it still remains the last building standing.
So the catalyst was the BART development,
building
and
the financial
development of the financial district.
Yeah. And so for the I-Hotel that we have now, it's actually referred to as the new I-Hotel because the old one was demolished. And there was a huge 10-year struggle to save the building. And the original eviction notice was actually sent out on the same year as the struggle for ethnic studies, which is 1968, right? So at the time, we saw a lot of student activists, community activists who would show up at the I-Hotel just demanding that poor people have a right to live here, and so that during that time, we also saw a lot of the housing crisis across the nation. So not only was the I-Hotel in Manilatown under fire, but there was also the gentrification of the Fillmore, right? Japantown, also the Bronx, right? On the East Coast, the same things were happening. In that era of the 60s and 70s, we saw a lot of radical Black Power movements. We saw a lot of Asian American movements. We saw a lot of calls for affordable housing, right? And that never really ended. That call for affordable housing never ended. And so the I-Hotel now, we really see it as a symbol of that struggle. And what does it mean to have that space now as a community center, as a space where youth and community folks can come in and share their art and their stories, and have youth come in and learn about that history, because it's not just I-Hotel history. It's not just Manilatown. It's also Chinatown. It's San Francisco. There were a lot of people who actually came from like around the world who would visit the I-Hotel when I was volunteering, and I met students from Japan who learned about it. I met people from Hawaii. I met like people from Spain. They would hear about it and they come to San Francisco, and I learned about it in class, and I want to see it for myself. So so that history is it runs deep for San Francisco. And so for me, coming into ethnic studies for the first time at SF State, up until then, I had never really been exposed to like Asian American like power in that way, and so I was in Larry Solomon's ethnic studies 100 class, and he was doing a section on the fall of the I-Hotel, and I remember watching the film in class and just crying because I was so because it's a sad story. You have a lot of elder Filipino and Chinese bachelors who lost their home in the community. Some died shortly after, and they didn't have anywhere to go. And of course, like on one hand, like, yeah, it's like I'm crying because it's sad. On the other hand, like I'm crying because it's so powerful. And I had never seen Asian Americans portrayed in such in a raw and empowering light. That we had the agency to do that. Like we can come out by the thousands and demand this. I had never seen that for myself as a young person. So that film really, it changed my life and my perception on what I should be studying, because growing up in Chinatown, Kearney and Jackson is right down the street from my grandma's house. Like I would walk by there all the time. And when I went to middle school, the bus stop that I went to was actually Kearney and Jackson when the I-Hotel was a hole in the ground. So I had literally been standing at the ground of the I-Hotel every day for 3 years, not knowing what it was until I got to, SF State and learned about the history. And so for me, it's, it's in my own backyard. I had been standing there and not knowing it. And it really felt like coming full circle and being able to volunteer at Manilatown and share, the history of Manilatown with youth and other people in San Francisco and around the world, really, for the significance of the place and what they still stand for.
That must have been very impactful, especially since you are an SF born and you've seen and learning about the history of where you've actually grown up and seen the legacy of people who look just like you organizing, and at the same time people who look just like probably your father being kicked out or your grandfather being kicked out from these housing units, right, for the development of the financial district, or for, if I remember the video, I think it was the fall of I-Hotel, is just the guy wanted to just flip the building,
and turn it into a parking lot,
and it never happened, too.
Exactly.
How sad was that?
Exactly.
That was the saddest part of the whole story. Is like it went through, they demolished it, and it just sat as an empty lot for years. Like, bruh didn't even make any money. If we can talk about capitalist shit, but you're not even a good capitalist. Come on, man. You didn't make money. You could have made money just keeping it there, and they're paying their rent. that was the saddest part. I was like, bruh, it just stood there empty.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful to see the progression in terms of fighting and getting a space eventually. And that's where we saw Role's release party for his album.
Right, yeah.
And it's like coming full circle too, right?
Yeah.
Putting ourselves into those spaces which historically have been fought for, some losses, but we're able to be there because of the fighting of organized Asian Americans.
Right.
It's dope. It's dope. What did you do for Manilatown when you were with them?
With Manilatown, I started as a student volunteer, so I would come in and help set up for events and stuff like that. I also did a lot of like setup for other people's rentals, using the space. But I really personally loved doing the tours, the I-Hotel tour for visitors and students, because every staff member, every volunteer has their own take and their own kind of version to the tour. And some people really like the old nightlife of Manilatown and the nightclubs and the art. I personally really stuck to, the influence of young Asian American activists and their contributions to this space. And so being able to do those tours for different visitors allowed me to revisit, things that I learned, and also learn something new from people who were actually there on the night that the sheriff came in 1977, and then they would come back and they're like, whoa, I haven't been here since that night. And then I learned something from them, so, and then seeing like the youngest group I've ever had was actually Denman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
And it was really hard to keep their attention, but you can kind of see in their eyes when when like you're teaching and it clicks with some of them, but my favorite part is really taking people up to the roof.
Yep. They loved it.
Yeah.
They
Okay,
remember
good.
that like weeks, months, like they're like, it's the roof.
Okay,
the roof was really nice for them.
Yeah. I really,
because it has a mural, if I remember right.
The mural is
like you can kind of see
in the lobby.
The roof, was it? What was on the roof? There's
a garden. There's like a 360-degree view. Like you can see the bridge.
But couldn't you see a mural on another building from the roof? No. Am I mixing it up?
Maybe.
Oh.
Now I'm like, oh my God, there was a mural this whole time, and now I'm unsure.
Maybe they were creating stories, like these Denman youth.
Which roof were you on?
Were you really with the group?
Right.
Nate, where were you?
But yeah, the roof was really my favorite part, because then they could see what people were after when they wanted to buy out the I-Hotel from Manilatown, because there's really no other view like that in San Francisco. You can see the Bay Bridge, the Kuwait Tower, you can see the water in the bay, you can see Chinatown, Russian Hill, Financial District. So no matter where you stand, you have an amazing view of San Francisco. And something that I personally like to share when I'm up there with tours, especially with college students or younger folks who are interested in the history, is that it's awesome that they came and learned about it today, but it also matters what you do with it tomorrow, right? And this history isn't just for us to learn about here, but it's for everyone. Like it's not just mine to share. It's not just yours to hold. It's for everyone to come and be a part of it, and to make sure that this history and the legacy of the work of Manilatown gets carried on and is remembered. So
what is the whole building? Is there units in it too right now?
So
and
when they
how
built,
does it work?
when they built the new I-Hotel, they also included, now my memory's fuzzy, 144 or so units of affordable senior housing. So it's subsidized senior housing. On the top, I think there's 15 levels, and then the bottom ground level, where the I-Hotel Manilatown Center is, like that's the community space where a lot of the galleries and events happen. But there's housing in there.
So all those housing is senior subsidized?
62 and up.
Hey, that's beautiful to hear, like it's just kind of crazy right now. I'm going through things with my grandma, and we're like trying to make sure that her health care is going well, and like finding the best situation for her to age well, right? And then just having these conversations with people. I was just in at the gym speaking to a physical therapist assistant who works in an assisted living facility in Japantown, where it's all elderly. And it's kind of crazy how we have set up our society to quote unquote take care of the elderly, where they're all there. Like he was saying, like what, 17 floors or something of just all elderly and different, and he would have to like do certain things like either move them, even clean them, because the care, they're just physically not able to do that, right? And even for him, it's heavy, like emotionally heavy to be there. And yeah, it's just interesting for me to think sometimes, like, how have we set up ourselves in this society to take care of our elderly? Especially, it's very interesting to compare that with the culture of Asian Americans, where the elderly traditionally is very respected and it's not that common for you to say, all right, we'll send our grandma to a care home, like, or for them to live, especially as an Asian American community, right? It's not a standard thing versus the traditional Western notion of, nursing home, like that once you get older, right? And I know you've had some experience in terms of contact with the elderly community, the veterans work and stuff. How has that experience been for you?
So I work at Veterans Equity Center.
Oh, you do right now?
Right.
Oh, okay. Dope. See, that's perfect.
So I work at VC, soon to be Bayanihan Equity Center. But being there, we work with seniors and adults with disabilities. And so learning that you're right, like we don't really set up our society to really care for our elders. And even though it's like a cultural thing, like institutionally, if we're all working all the time, like there's really no one specific caretaker in the family, right? So one of the most important things that I've learned is that we advocate for seniors to be as independent as possible, you know, to avoid institutionalizing them in care homes, because that's not really a way to thrive and to flourish on your own, you know, especially, and there's been a campaign called Dignity Fund, I think. Now I forgot my own but
because you're off the clock, you're off the clock. It doesn't count if you're not at work,
right. But really, like aging with dignity, is what I'm trying to get at.
Is it aging in place?
Aging in place with dignity. With dignity, right?
Oh, okay.
And so, like for myself, I kind of get attached to the Chinese seniors that come in because they remind me of my grandparents. And when
do they come into VAC also?
Yeah, yeah, we get a lot of the demographics are pretty a wide range of different folks and backgrounds. But I grew up translating letters and filling out applications for my grandparents. And a lot of our social services reflect that same kind of assistance. So when they come in and they tell me that, you know, my children live far away or they don't have time during the day to help me, you know, come to these appointments with me, that's where we step in. So I've seen it in my own family, you know, and they come in with the same story. So it's kind of the things that I try to help them with are really similar to things that my grandparents have needed. And I know that my grandparents also go to other community spaces where those services are provided. So yeah.
How long have you been with VC?
I think maybe about 2 years.
Word?
Yeah.
Damn, you've been there a while.
Yeah.
Hey, VC is dope in terms of their focus on treating or giving support to the elderly and in the community.
Yeah.
And like sometimes it's beautiful to see, but also sad when I see the elderly, like especially Filipinas, they be outside the Bayanihan with their carts.
Yeah.
And they're all lined up.
Yeah.
And stuff. I'm like, that's dope to see.
Yeah.
But then also just thinking of their life.
Yeah.
Right? Is totally different from the traditional aspect of them in a community, say back home in the Philippines, in the barangay,
right,
and just in their little town where they're like the watchdog, right, of the community. There's this funny meme where it's like security cameras in the US, security camera in the Philippines is the lola in the window.
They're actually just watching your movements, right? Yeah.
And Bayanihan Center, we were just there stopping by to drop off stuff yesterday, and then Rich was saying like, yo, there's an energy in this space to be like, people who have come through here, the work that has been done here, the programs that have been put out to serve the community. It's very important to have those spaces. And it's something that I hope continues, right? And we never lose it or anything, because especially with the current developments and like, you know, it's interesting how we have stories of the past of redevelopment and same shit happens.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, gentrification here and all that. Have you seen changes throughout the city, like from growing up?
Oh,
that
definitely.
has like impacted you?
Definitely. I remember one time going to Chinatown, and I live in the Outer Mission. I used to live in the Outer Mission, so I didn't get to really. I didn't make the time. Not that I didn't have time. I didn't make the time to go to Chinatown to see my grandparents when I was in college, because I was really into, you know, campus organizing and all that stuff.
So they lived in Chinatown?
Yeah, they live in Chinatown. And so when I did make time to go see them, I came to realize that, like, I didn't really recognize a lot of Chinatown. And there were a lot more transplants living coming in and out of the buildings where usually Chinese elders would come out of, and everything was kind of tourist centered, right? I went into the shop to buy something, and they kind of thought I was a tourist, but I grew up here, so it was just really interesting and sad to see the way that the demographics have changed in Chinatown, but yeah.
So would I be correct in like kind of inferring that some of your writing is attempts to like immortalize the stories of your family, especially from the immigrant experience and all that?
I like that, so I'm gonna say yes.
Going back to that piece that you did, the high tides, right? Stories of your mama. I actually really liked one of the lines where you were saying that your grandma, well, after the earthquake, right? And when your mama comes home and said, hey, there was an earthquake, and your mama just goes like, oh, I thought it was the upstairs people vacuuming, right? I was like, oh shit, that's a hella grandma thing to say about that. But you grew up in the home with like your grandma as a like big figure to take care of you and all that?
Yeah, she was my primary caretaker for a really long time. And also in the story, this is something she really loves to tell people. Like 10 days after they came to the US, I was born, and so grandma duties began almost immediately. So she really raised me herself with while my parents were working, and my grandpa was also working too. So I spent a lot of time with her, and she really shared a lot of her values with me. So I'm closest to her.
Is that why you're fluent in? Are you fluent in Mandarin?
In Toisan and Cantonese.
Oh, and those are the letters you said you would help translate letters for the elderly.
So I actually, out of my whole family, I'm the only one who never went to Chinese school, so I never learned to read or write it, but I am the one who can speak it well. So a lot of the seniors who come in, or my grandparents, would get letters about their SSI or phone bills or whatever. They come in English, right? Everything comes in English. So I would read in English, and then I would translate it back to them in either Cantonese or Toisan, which is their village dialect.
Oh. But that's dope that you know it. You can speak and you can understand. That's very important, especially as a second generation Asian American, because we lose a lot of. I've been having discussions with people about how language very powerful in terms of retention of culture and even just communication. Sometimes there are words that you can't really express in English that is in another language that has a totally different meaning. And then even for me, I feel like I flip into a different personality when I'm speaking Tagalog, and it's different when I'm in English. I don't know if I'm stunting more, like with my hip hop shit, right? Or if Tagalog is just corny ass jokes and having fun. Like it's weird sometimes. I'm like, am I the same fucking person? Am I just being fake and shit? But it's different how using the language, you embody a different space, and it's very important that, in my opinion, people are able to retain that. But because of the whole history of forcing assimilation on people, people have lost it, right? But I think that's super important to retain. Have you tried like infusing more of your culture and all that into your writing in that sense?
I think like culturally, I think there are certain like Chinese holidays or rituals or ceremonies that definitely stick with me and hopefully will come through in my next pieces to come. But I think more so is just really telling the experience that they've had. And I'm really... I kind of operate on that Asian American lens and framework, but it does really make me reconsider, like, well, what are their perspectives, right? And culturally speaking, because the way my grandparents see the world is really different from how I learned it from them. So from a cultural point of view, like it's not, I wouldn't say that there's too much of it, but when I do speak of them or speak to them or share their stories, there's definitely elements that I try to portray from their perspective. And I try to humanize that as much as possible because there are some things that I don't understand.
When you say they see the world differently from you, what do you mean?
They've experienced the world differently. They've experienced Japanese occupation. They've experienced famine. They've experienced extreme poverty on farmlands, and them moving to a metropolis, city, and not being able to go home because they fear not being able to come back to the U.S. Like, they see the world differently than I do because I can navigate it differently. Whereas they have a general, it's like, I think they kind of accepted the fact that they're here now and that's it. And then with Trump's administration and all these things, cutting Social Security, like, I worry for them. But I know that they've been surviving since they got here in '89. So I think sometimes I don't know if they're actually comfortable yet or if they're still on survival mode, So when I talk to my grandparents, like, sometimes they'll say, back in my day, they'll start telling stories, but a lot of that is really traumatic things. So that's why I say they see the world differently,
When you're writing these stories of your mama, right? What's your process like of writing a story that's not necessarily your story? How do you... But it is your story, but it's just from her perspective and all that. Because I'm interested in that because I have this idea of how can I tell the story of my Lola? How can I tell the story of my Lolo in the Philippines who maybe I've never met, but then can I reconstruct stories from my uncles and aunts if they tell me stuff? Like, what's your process of writing? And especially in this kind of like third person type thing.
Actually, when I wrote Shaking Earth, I was really wrestling with whether or not I should write it in first person because I really am just translating my mom's story. But I grew up on a lot of Amy Tan's writings. She wrote Joy Luck Club, Bonesetter's Daughter. And a lot of that was kind of telling of a woman's story, but of what you knew. I'm not speaking for her, I especially don't want to do that. So that's why I write it in third person. It's just, I'm writing what I know and not speaking for her in that sense. So whatever is here, I'm really just sharing what she told me. And I think, I'm just not a fan of speaking for other people.
True.
Yeah.
So what do you envision with this in terms what's gonna be released in the next few weeks about other pieces?
For stories with my mom, I think I'm choosing to write these things out because there have been a lot of things that we've experienced together that were traumatic for all of us. And there's, a sense around trauma and holding it in is really bad for you. And I know that our family and the things that we've experienced as Chinese American women, immigrant women, it doesn't happen in a vacuum just to us. It happens to other people and other families. And the feedback that I've received just from this story about my mom navigating an earthquake already received. I've already heard from so many people where, I can see like my own mom in this, or I can see my own family in this. And so I'm kind of very carefully crafting the next stories because it does trace very painful experiences that my mom's been through. And I definitely don't want to portray it in a way where there are parts where she doesn't want to share or or things like that. And I'm also in those stories too. So being honest and upfront with what we've experienced, and then crafting in a way that is easy to read, where you can follow our story but also relate to it in a very humanizing way. And I think that's the thing, is I'm trying to humanize my mom as much as possible, because there's not a lot of narratives out there about Chinese immigrant women from southern China specifically, other than Amy Tan's work, that really humanizes people this way right now.
Do you see,
or not that I've heard of.
Could you educate me a little bit when you say from southern China? Is there differences in terms of the representation of Chinese immigrant women from southern China from other parts of China in terms of the available literature? In terms of literature, from what I've read, has always been from an American perspective, like based in San Francisco. Chinese American woman goes through this. I think when I say southern China, I'm referring specifically to the area where my mom was born and raised, in the villages. And then there's also the bigger cities, and then there's Hong Kong, right? When we watch like Chinese movies, like a lot of them are made from the 90s forward, are made in Hong Kong, and they show a lot of metropolis areas. I keep smacking the mic, I'm sorry. Okay. But from what I've learned from my mom too, specifically, she also wrestled with ideas of, being a country bumpkin versus being a very sophisticated city woman from Hong Kong. And they have like their own stereotypes of what it means to be from different regions. So that's something that was also very prominent when she would tell me stories of her own insecurities, of not, her own values of not being good enough because of certain perceptions that were coming out of China, right? And that she carried over. And she always wanted to be very proper and very cleaned up and sophisticated, and to be very ladylike. And so those things are also part of her character and her personality too. So, yeah. So I was thinking about this. Since you have a strong cultural background and history with Chinese American community, culture, since it's your family, but you've been very active in the Filipino American community, what are like differences or similarities in terms of these two communities that you've seen, you've observed, and how you've like interacted with them and all, from your perspective of a Chinese, Asian American, right? Like, what have you seen?
I can't really say I've spent any time in Chinese American community spaces that in the way that I've done in Philam spaces. That time has been zero, aside from Manilatown. And even then, the focus of Manilatown is more so Filipino American. So, I really haven't done any community work in Chinese American spaces other than being with my family, So, and I don't really see a lot of, I wouldn't categorize that as differences or similarities, but that, working in the Philam community has taught me to look for certain things that I still need to learn in my own family, or to look for different things in the Chinese American community. Like, I can say as an observer, as someone who grew up in Chinatown, that I know my streets, I know my community in that way. But like actually putting in the work as an organizer for progressive goals or something like that, like I can't say I've done that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it's not to bump it, right? Because you've done a lot of work in the Filipino American community, right? It's just interesting to me because whenever we have presentations about statistics in sociology classes or social welfare policy, right, Asian American is lumped into one. Right. And then arguably there are those differences, especially with Southeast Asians, or the I believe in terms of poverty rates, highest is African American and Latino, but if you break down Asian American, it would be Native American, and Native American and African Americans have the highest rates of poverty in terms of the general census. But then if you break down Asian American into its subgroups, the Hmong are the highest rates. And it's interesting to see also that we, as Asian Americans, have a lot to learn also about even the inner workings of Asian America, right? And then who is represented in terms of either in media or statistics, even, right? That's why I always liked once Filipino became a checkbox to check. I was like, yes, I don't have to choose between Pacific Islander or Asian, right, or the other or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. It's institutionalized now. But I'm always interested in that because there does seem, and I wanted to get your perspective also, because especially in some of the more prestigious institutions, quote unquote, there is a higher performance in terms of academics of Chinese Americans or East Asians versus Southeast Asians. And for example, like in Berkeley right now, I think 20% or so is Chinese American. And then, but in comparison, you have like Korean, which is just 3%, or Filipino American is just 3%, even if Filipinos are the highest population of Asian Americans in California. So it's like these differences, but we're all Asian American, right? And then I'm always interested in how to build, if you have ideas, right? How to build solidarity among the groups, even if there are disparities, right? How do you do that? Because sometimes we build solidarity through shared struggle, but what if you don't have the shared struggle, right? How do you build solidarity in that way? In terms of, if we just look at the most polarized groups, right? Black and white. How do you build solidarity between black and white? And then in this case, within Asian American, how do you build solidarity for, say, Hmong or Cambodian or Laos communities, and with the more quote unquote successful or stereotypically successful East Asian groups, right? Do you have ideas?
That's a really loaded question.
Do you have the answer?
No.
Me neither. I don't have it. I don't have it either. Right?
That's a really loaded question, and I think it's something that we have to continue asking ourselves. To do it in a way where your struggle is not involved, I think is kind of really shallow, you know? And the best example that I can think of is really the Asian American movement of the 60s, when we were sharing, people were sharing their struggles and their differences, but also understanding of power in numbers, right? But then there's also a question of what is the solidarity for? Like, what is the goal of that particular, purpose for that call? Because there are different ways to galvanize the community, and you draw different ideas. Like, for example, the murder of Vincent Chin. Like, one Chinese man was murdered in a hate crime, but the silver lining was that we saw a national galvanizing of the Asian American community that was kind of calling attention to, the hate crimes that occurred. But yeah, I think it depends on what the call is for, because if it's really just for the sake of whatever, then it's going to be whatever. But if it comes in a way that it addresses something that is deeply rooted, and you share the divisions, you address the divisions and share ideas and things that you've been through, I think that means a lot much more.
That was a great answer though. From your
Thanks,
understanding, I know, right? So from your understanding of like the historical organizing efforts, especially from the ethnic studies movement, do you see differences in terms of the present day organizing community world versus what you've understood as the strong solidarity during the ethnic studies, that I-Hotel movement of the, was it late 60s?
Yeah.
Late 60s?
I think there's in my head, I've categorized it as like the campus organizing, and then there's the community organizing, right? As far as like campus organizing goes, like there was like a huge thing at SF State, like maybe about a year and a half ago for ethnic studies. And then there's ongoing actions for the the Arab American studies too, and that's, I feel like there's always something happening, right? But like taking it off campus has been different in my eyes, because then like as somebody who has been so focused and immersed in campus organizing around arts, culture, education, and then moving off campus after, no longer being a student, organizing is different. It's a different ball game, it's one thing to get your peers involved and to show up in a space. It's another thing to get a multi-generational crowd of elders, youth, community workers, and regular folks involved, because it's just different. It's just different. It's period. It's just different. Yeah. And so that was something that I had to take a lesson from, was that some of the organizing that happened on campus when I was there kind of looked for more short-term gratification. Not so much gratification, that came out wrong, but your work is there as long as you're a student. Right. And I think sometimes the campus administration knows, because you're only a student and you're going to leave soon, that they don't have to take you seriously. So something that I had to learn moving into a nonprofit was longevity. Like, how do we, I only know short-term goals. I only knew up until then, like short-term organizing, like plans and projects, but working for a nonprofit that has been doing this work for 20 years and still ongoing, kind of taught me to like look at the bigger picture. What do we do? What is a short-term project gonna look like? What's the impact gonna look like for 2 years from now, right? So I still really love seeing students get involved at SF State, and like looking back as an alumni, like, do your thing, like demand what you need, the resources that you need to thrive and to flourish on campus, because some people honestly really could care less for the students. And if you don't speak up, they're never going to know. Yeah, and they're not going to hand it to you.
Some people who be making like $400K a year, fam. Oh my God. When I saw that the salaries are public information, and I started researching how much people get paid, like the president of a community college, president of SF State, like, bruh, I want to be president, yo. Right. That's just $300K, $400K. Like, and these kids be paying out of their butts for tuition and all. Yeah. It really shows like a disparity of interest. Like, and it makes sense what you were just pointing out. Yeah, they're like, okay, these kids will just be here for 4 years, or some will just drop out soon, right? The leaders of the organization, they're seniors, so we can kind of push for just some small changes, and then we'll see how organized they are next year, right? Wow, that I never actually thought of it in that way, of like riding along in terms of the administrative point of view, riding the waves. And it really shows why complacency is their method of dealing with it, because that's their long term, right? If they can be complacent for now with little changes, they still maintain their salary, right? That shit's sad.
It is.
Could you liven us up with another piece? Or not?
You got too serious there, huh? Taking down the institution.
I know.
Let's see. So I think I'll jump into the Friscopinos piece.
Yes. Would you give a little context?
So for Friscopinos and the Native Immigrant, it was kind of half album review, half kind of chronicling the experience of being involved with Role and Mr. A and putting together the album release party at the I-Hotel. So for this particular piece, I really struggled with, because Role is a really old friend of mine, and I really wanted to do this piece justice and really get the points across the way what he had intended for the album, but also the way it played out. Right?
So context, this is the Native Immigrant album.
Right.
That was just released last year.
Right.
And Role Richard Olivar, government name. And you've known him for a while.
Yeah, since we were teenagers.
Oh, word. Yeah. SF natives.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
Small world.
Cool.
Okay, so for this piece, I think. Thank you. I'm going to read off just the first bit, and it's a context for the piece itself and the album. Against the backdrop of San Francisco, Native Immigrant frames a commentary of the quickly changing landscape of the city. Between growing up and the city growing distant from its roots, its residents continuously fight back as working families are constantly swept from their homes by skyrocketing costs of housing, as beautiful ethnic murals are painted over in the Mission by transplant entrepreneurs, and as local art spaces become luxury condos to accommodate incoming populations of young professionals. These symptoms of gentrification and whitewashing have been ringing out the vibrant soul of San Francisco over the past decade. Additionally, characterized by a trend of profitable evictions, booming tech industry, and police brutality, the city quickly became unrecognizable, and us loyal San Franciscans near and far hold fast to our ethnic food, our ethnic art, and our ethnic languages, and our collective memories of home.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Can you tell me your process of writing this piece? How did it come about? And the concept of it? Because when I was reading it, it was a very good combination of analytical approach in terms of the city, the environment that this album was written under, and then the album itself as this place of resistance almost of the changes, and just chronicling an immigrant experience. And almost like the point that I was getting was the album was an inner work in terms of diving into Role, his self, and having to learn about himself and his city and his family even more. So could you dive into what was the process like of doing it?
So when I was writing this, it took me a few months to just even outline this, because there's so much in the album itself to unpack, right? And because the album is about San Francisco, I'm not just writing about the album, I'm writing about the city of San Francisco. I'm writing about home. I'm writing about the changes that we're witnessing. So because I also work at VC and we have a lot of advocacy efforts around affordable housing, I happen to have this language to help me articulate what it is that we're seeing, and what Role is trying to tell us, that these changes are happening in our city, and there's a very protective stance that he has around the city of San Francisco. But writing this really was, I wanted to give a context to who Role is in terms of him as a growing artist, right? Him knowing him as a teenager and watching him fall in love with rap and hip hop, and dreaming about, being on stage and making it.
I thought you were about to say fall in love with someone like Jenny or something. I was like, who's hip hop?
Hip hop with hip hop. And then becoming adults with the resources that we have now, and really being part of the process, and watching him going through the music making process, and then getting involved with the community, specifically the Filipino American community, because I don't think he's really done that before specifically. And so the conversations that he has around his music, around housing, around San Francisco, it's a very San Francisco story first and foremost. And he happens to be Filipino, so those stories also come to light. And he, when I asked him about the album, he mentioned his mom a lot too. So before I even signed on to the project, I asked him, why this project? What makes this album different from everything else? And it was just the involvement that he sought to engage with the community. That was a really big part of it, even though we may not always see everything blow up on social media, but it's the workings of being present and being appreciative of community organizers around him. I think that's what made this one really important, was that he really just went and spent time with the communities that would relate to this album the most. So yeah, and I tried to outline that as much as possible. But
so you would sit with him, have just conversations of why he wrote the album, and all that in order to put this piece together?
There would, we would have like team meetings on our approach towards the album release party at the I-Hotel, and every, once in a while we'd check in, how are you doing? How do you feel about this? And, those thoughts would just come up. But when it came to putting the team together for the album release party, that's when I really wanted to be upfront about, what's your purpose? What's your goal? What do you want out of this? And so, yeah, like I hadn't really had the chance to work with Role in that capacity before. And it was always more of a, I support you, go do your thing. But then now as an organizer with resources and being able to put shows together, when you asked me to get involved, I really wanted to know what I'm signing up for. And it's not just a date, time, place. When I sign on to a project, I really wholeheartedly believe in everything that you want to pull off, right? So like, let me in on your vision and let me know how I can help you make this happen. So yeah, it was, and so it wasn't just what do you want for the album release party? It was, what do you want out of this album? What was your goal when you were making it, and how do you feel about it now? Where do you want to take it? So yeah, it was much more than just sharing his album. It was where he took it and how he did that in the community spaces that he did.
You know what hit me when I read this piece was the concept of writing for our communities, because this piece as a whole is very well written. Props, but in terms of an analysis of the macro, right, using the micro example of an album and the little specifics within it in order to relate it to the larger issues at play of gentrification, of displacement, of even the otherization of immigrants, and then trying to either assimilate, acculturate, and find a home here, and connecting it with some form of an academic framework, right? Because we'd be up in school reading all this other shit, which would be written by like boring ass fools. I'd be saying, sorry, Marx, I know you did hella good shit, but supposedly, but your shit is dry as fuck, bro. Like reading all these papers, like it's so draining. Reading all these journals, because especially if it's usually by a arguably academic who is rich, white, and male. Right? And then having this as an avenue to tell our community stories, very important. And I much appreciate reading it.
Thank you.
It was actually a fun read. It was a good flow between the little entertaining story, informal and formal, right? And I think we need more of that. I think we really need more of a critical lens, but for our community and written from within, right? Because a lot of this shit is written from without, right? As a sociologist studying the Filipino American community, or I'll be an ethnographer and I'll do participant observation, but you're only there for what, max 6 months or some shit like that, right? It ain't really the people writing our own stories, and that's why this was a very important thing, right? And I think from your involvement throughout, you are now officially a Friscopino. I think because of that, right? I think you are now adopted, and you are, and you can say you are Friscopino.
Right. I really want to mention that Friscopino is a term that Tony Robles, the author poet, came up with, and he has a whole poem called Friscopinos, and he's actually on the second track of the Native Immigrant album with Friscopinos 2. He's just an incredible role model for all of us.
That fool has such a smooth voice. Yeah. Too, when he was reading up the poem, I was like, damn, this shit is sweet. It's like on point. It was like, and when he was talking about black and Filipino and Italian Filipino, I was just envisioning how all the mixed babies look, right? I was like, yeah. Come on, mix it, man, mix it. It was a great transition having that piece, and he's historic in terms of his art for the community. Is that right? If I remember. Yeah. And he's been here in the community for decades. And that was one of those things too where it made me very appreciative of the work of putting the album together because of the people he brought in, right? He has even Buan, he has Zaldi was on it.
Yeah.
If I'm right. And then people even working behind the scenes, taking you in and having the launch at Manilatown, right? Is it called Manilatown?
Yeah, I-Hotel Manilatown Center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, did I say it right?
It's a mouthful. So Manilatown is right. Yeah.
And I-Hotel too. You could just, cool. And having that as a comprehensive just release, right? Shows a lot of thought and work into it. What was your function in terms of organizing the launch? Was that your main focus on the project?
I think I was brought in. I was brought in specifically to assist with the launch, especially because I had been at the I-Hotel for 2 years volunteering, and so I know the place like the back of my hand. So with the team, I assisted with logistics, contacting the venue, making sure that all the artists had their bios in, and gave us what they needed for tech, just basically arranging it so that the space and the artists would be ready for that day of, and making sure everybody got the information they needed so they were all on the same page.
What was the process like for you to be part of that whole project, and then the seeing the album launch event in fruition?
For me specifically, because it was Manilatown, because it was hip hop, because it was Role and Mr. Ray, like I think it became very personal, because these are all things that I love, and advocate for. So being able to work on a team, even with Joseph, who's brilliant.
He's okay.
I just knew that if I didn't work on this, I would regret it. I would regret not taking the opportunity to work with this team of people. And so for me, it was being able to work with artists, because at this time I had really wanted to get back into writing things like this, and I hadn't given myself the opportunity to connect with other artists or even work with other people. So getting involved with this really opened up my doors to working with other artists, and just watching their performances and going to different shows, and spending time with the guys and watching their musical process in creating and crafting and going back and editing, and really being part of the journey, the whole way through. So getting that insight on who they are as artists, what their creative process was like, what they wanted to present to the world, what their intentions were, I think that helped me shape my writing for this, especially.
So what do you see yourself doing in terms of your writing within the Asian American research and Asian American articles like this? What's your goal? What's your vision?
To give some context into my goals, when I was at SF State writing my senior thesis for Asian American Studies,
what did you write about?
Hip hop in Asian America.
Oh, what the fuck? That's dope.
Right. So this a lot of this writing really comes off of a foundation of research that I did at SF State around Asian American identity, the impact of hip hop, and also vice versa, and how Asian Americans impact hip hop, right? But I'm not here to argue what hip hop is or isn't. I'm here to kind of look at where we can take it as a community, right? So after, kind of diving into that research, at that same time, I was really struggling to find resources and literature other than Jeff Chang, Oliver Wang, Empire of Funk. At the time, I think Legions of Boom was getting ready to be released. Other than those sources and writers, there's really not a lot that focuses on Asian Americans and hip hop specifically. And so for myself, and the goal of this writing, the bottom line for my hip hop writing research, all of that, is really to contribute to the literature in the field of Asian American hip hop. Like, that's my only goal, is to produce literature, to produce this, because I know I'm not the only one who wants to research this. In the future, if there are college students or whoever who needs resources, like, I want you to be able to look this up, Google it, and be able to find my stuff for free, and hopefully use it as a resource, as something that you can cite, because most of my work is based on academic sources. So if you need academic sources, like I got you. And on the Ruby piece, I actually cited my academic sources so that anybody who wants to use that piece for school or whatever, like, it's from a credible source. So yeah, that's my goal, is to contribute to that, that literature, because it's lacking.
Yeah. That's important in terms of the knowledge base of academia and academic writing, because I have a love-hate thing with that shit, like, but I understand.
I can't
like,
even
the importance of having the knowledge bank.
Right.
I don't like it, but I understand why it's there. But I fucking don't like it. But it's important that you're writing that, right? It's important. I'm grateful you're doing it, because I don't want to do it.
Somebody has to do it.
Somebody has to do it, but at least you're doing it and you're good at it, right?
Thank you.
But I wanted to ask, how come you got into hip hop specifically? Have you grown up on that? How come you decided to do your CM thesis on hip hop and Asian Americans?
I just woke up one day. I'm just kidding. When I remember the first hip hop song I ever heard was like a remix of between like Tupac and Biggie on 94.9, and it was like when cassette tapes were moving like on their way out, but the mini boom boxes were on their way in, and then MP3s were on the rise, but you would still have your cassette tape player to record whatever song you wanted. And I remember like hearing the bass on that track, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? My heart is racing. And then throughout high school, like I kicked it with this crew of b-boys, and at the time they were called the Jive Corps Legion. And
the
like
Jive Corps Legion.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a bomb ass name.
Right? They should stuck to that. Yeah. But they were a group of, dancers who really just loved challenging themselves and learning. And at the time, I was also listening to a lot of Talib Kweli. And if you follow Talib, like, it's a lot of truth-seeking, storytelling. So all of that kind of just stuck with me, right? And that's just, hip hop is just something, the music was just something I loved. And then being able to go to b-boy jams and going to events and seeing the community come together, and that always stuck with me. And so
Did you dance too?
I tried to be girl for like maybe 2 months, and then I gave up because it was hard. But
you've been like an active participant in going to these things and being part of the culture and all. Yeah. Did you rap also?
Oh no, I write because I can't rap. So
hey, you're the fifth pillar.
Well,
knowledge, fam,
it's
right?
definitely hard sometimes when like if I share with somebody that I'm into hip hop, or that I try to write these things, and it's been some kind of like automatic response. It's kind of like a test to see how much you know, right? Or like, do you really know hip hop? Or like, how much do you really love it? And it's exhausting, honestly. and also as like a woman of color, like there's no, as an Asian American woman in hip hop, there's almost like no space or representation for us. And so when Ruby or Rocky or somebody like that puts out music, like I hold on to that because like we're marginalized, and so for me personally, as somebody who is an Asian American woman in hip hop who does not produce music, who does not B-girl, who does not DJ, like what is my craft, right? That's something that I always struggled with. So my writing is kind of like, well, it's here. This is what I got for you. So I may not be on stage, I may not be performing, but I'm watching and I'm chronicling you, and I'm watching your impact on the community. And that's the love I have for hip hop.
And that's hip hop. Don't forget that's the fifth pillar. People forget. Yeah. That's part of it. Yeah. Because without it, we wouldn't even have our stories there, right? KRS-One always preaches on that wisdom, on that knowledge, right? And that's an important part. And I really feel that there is they just gave what's his face Nas his like fellowship at Harvard, or knowledge, right? But it is sorry for asking those questions.
No, you're good.
But it's the traditional thing,
Yeah.
And it's almost like part of the hip hop. Like I was kind of. Not struggling, but kind of playing with the idea with Seth too, about like in ciphers, sometimes you might have a more friendly cipher, like, okay, your turn, right? Or that like competitive, like, let me do my shit right now, let me spit, right? Because I was telling Seth, like, bro, sometimes you don't know how to pass the mic. And then it's like, yeah, just get into the zone, right? And that's hip hop too. That's a little bit of that, like,
there's
the
definitely
challenge,
like
right?
battle culture.
Yeah, like even if you got the respect, it's like, okay, throw down, right? Let me see your graph, right? Let me see your bars, bro, right? And now it's also, all right, let me see your writing. How well do you understand the context of hip hop and why it's here and what really pushed this culture to be here and why we have to continue it, right? Why we have to write about it. And I feel that we do, because especially to be like this to the traditional academic institutions that have excluded hip-hop, that have excluded people of color of telling our stories, and even the stories of Asian Americans in hip-hop, right? Like, thank goodness for people who are pushing for it, like G Yamazawa. I know we were at the same concert and we were like, what the fuck is this guy doing? He was ripping it. And then then we see Ruby kill it too. It's beautiful to see, right? I'm like, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So are you going to write a book about this?
A book?
Yeah.
I mean, the goal is eventually I do want to share my research with folks. And when I actually applied for the master's program at SF State for Asian American Studies with my research and my thesis, but I was denied because of, all these things. But I think that was the best thing that happened to me, because it forced me to look at my goals outside of academia, and academia had run me into the ground so hard, and if it was not for my research, I was holding on to that for dear life, because at that time I was struggling with my mental health, and so the only thing I looked forward to was my research in Asian American Studies. So because that didn't work out into the master's program, it kind of forced me to like realign like my vision, like, okay, what do you want to do? Why do you need to get into the program? And Ata Allison actually sat me down and was like, well, why do you want to be in the program? Like, what's your goal? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And she was like, well, that's not helpful. If you don't know what you're going to use a master's for, then, you should really think of it as a tool to help you get somewhere or to help you do something. It's not a destination, right? And then I talked to Professor Dariotis, who was like, well, what do you want to do, really? Like, aside from everything else, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to write. And she was like, you don't need a master's for that. You can just write.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God. Yes. Because I'd been in undergrad for 7 years. Everything was geared towards school, right? Everything I produced is for academia. So the idea that I could do this without a classroom, without a professor, that I could do this on my own was so like, oh my God, I can do this like just for me. Like I don't need to be graded. I don't need to submit this to somebody for, validation that it's good enough. That was a huge struggle in writing. But like taking the writing to a level where it's on my terms outside of the ivory tower. It's on it's
on the brown carabao.
It's for the community, and I'm in these spaces, and so it's a very particular perspective that I'm trying to get across. But and all those things that I've learned from academia, the resources the skills that I've built through academia, and the research that I've built as a foundation for, short essays like Friscopinos and the Native Immigrant. Eventually I do want to put those things into one book and to share it, sometime in the next 5-10 years, hopefully, but
5.
I'll work on it. But yeah, so this is something that is very personal to me because of, just the ways that I've held on to it and the way it's held on to me. And it found its way back to me through the Native Immigrant album, because after leaving SF State, I didn't touch it for about 2 years. And so it wasn't until Mr. Ray and Role came up and said, you want to get on this project? And I was like, okay, this is the first hip hop related thing I've done in about 2 years. And so they really reminded me of why I love doing this in the first place. So as much as I held on to it, it found its way back to me, even when I wasn't in the right place to really pick it up again. So it was always there. But yeah, eventually a book will come, and I hope that it will be personal and critical and with the Asian American framework, but also really honoring the Black culture and Black history that hip hop comes from, first and foremost. Because a lot of the times that we have conversations about Asian American hip hop, we kind of omit that from our conversations. And that's something that I've also wanted to explore too, is, the whole conversation about appropriation, misappropriation, and understanding Black history and where we stand in that as Asian Americans. And then with the agency and a platform like hip hop, right? So, yeah.
So is your focus in the upcoming writings that you're doing really on hip hop and Asian American artists within using hip hop as a platform in that sense?
Pretty much. What I really wanted to explore is Asian American hip hop artists who have an impact on their community and how that impacts their identity. That's my thesis. That's my entire thesis. But the resources that I needed were lacking, right? And having examples of that. So these short essays that I'm writing about, Role and Ruby, like they're the micro to the macro, like you were saying earlier, right? They're the examples that I needed. This is the kind of stuff that I needed to see and to be able to source in order to do that kind of research in the beginning. So when I was doing my research, I actually had to backtrack so much in terms of where is Asian American hip hop? What does it look like? Like what are the stories? Who are we talking about? In terms of like getting specific examples for what I wanted to research, there wasn't a lot out there. So, trying to create the sources that I need for my own stuff. Just going back to my my younger self and asking what did I need at the time, and then creating it for myself now.
That's dope. Like we definitely need more studying of ourselves, studying within, and then writing those stories. Like I'd be talking to folks about the importance of having those role models in a sense, like to be able to envision the possibility of ourselves in those positions. And then there really is something different about like Ruby in a sense of her connection to the community. Like she's a very community loved artist. Like it's really beautiful to see, especially her humility and all that. And I think that serves as a perfect segue to, could you read a snippet of your Ruby piece? Because I remember reading your piece and then it was very, very personal in the sense of the impact that it had on you.
Yeah. The piece that I wrote about Ruby was really more of like a personal reflection on how her album made me feel, because it was just so much that she had packed in from her own experiences that it was kind of impossible not to feel the way that she did when she was making it, right? Okay, so I'm gonna share this little snippet of something I saw outside the club at Brick and Mortar, and this was on the day of Ruby's album release party. Escaping the heat of the venue outside, I watched Ruby walk quietly through the brick and mortar front doors to make her way backstage. Seemingly returning from rehearsing and memorizing her lyrics, she wrapped up her earbuds and was stopped in her tracks by a fan. Clearly over the moon, a towering young white male fan was beyond thrilled to stand face to face with a Tacloban phenom, voice shaking, eagerly unwrapping his newly purchased copy of Circa 91 for an autograph. And I chose to specifically put that in the reflection because I think of the ways that hip hop is such a male dominated culture and industry, right? And also just watching that was like, it flipped that whole world. It inversed it because now you have this brown woman of color who is at the center, and it's not about centering your white stories. Now the white story is a fan, right? Like watching that was like after all the stories that we've learned about Eurocentrism and being marginalized, now Ruby stands at the center of all this, and everyone else is kind of revolving around her stories and what she kind of presented, right, in those the immigrant narrative. And so watching that was like a very like personified kind of example of the way we kind of carve that space out for ourselves and force other folks to listen and to witness those stories.
This is a very powerful image. Just to think about that. It's reverse colonization through music.
Decolonization, right? Decolonization through music. Yeah.
But it was beautiful to see like the amount of people that came out. And then I remember you saying in your piece about how the folks just a few days after actually the release of the music, they were bumping to the music. They were singing along, especially the Us song.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The brown woman rise, alamin ang iyong ugat, right?
Right.
And it's great to see that. And then she's doing the video shoots with folks with the All Pinay video shoot recently here locally at Balboa, right?
Right.
And were you there? Oh,
yeah, I was there.
Yeah, of course, right? And bringing in the community in that sense is something that's not always done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was definitely amazing to see how much the response that she got within a few days of just dropping that album, and people being able to recite every word at the show after only 48 hours. But it wasn't just singing along. It was like people were reciting it. You know, they were reciting her words like it was like a mantra, and there was so much affirmation in the energy. And it's incredible because it's like you don't really see a lot of people really source out the community that way, and Ruby has been very responsive to everybody who has shown her love and given her feedback, and she remains so humble in everything, in all her milestones. And so watching her do the call out for San Jose, watching her do the call out for San Francisco, for Taking Names and for Us, and being there, it was like people wanted to be there and to be a part of it. And I think that's like how much more hip hop can it get? You know, like that you're engaging in your community and that they're a part of your storytelling, and that you're reflecting them in some sense and they reflect you, and that's Kapwa, right? Like how much more, you know, I thought it was just so beautiful, and seeing like infants to aunties to academics to artists to you know, it was really a beautiful day, you know, at Balboa, and she's doing her day 2 tomorrow, so I'm really excited to see how this turns out. And she's
really for the same video
for the same video, and I think she announced that the video will be dropping on March 8th, which is International Women's Day, and it's very purposeful and intentional, and I can't wait to see how it turns out.
Yeah, so you'll be there tomorrow?
Probably not. I don't think I'm needed. But just to witness everything, I might just roll through.
Oh, dope. Yeah. That's beautiful. Like, it's just, I remember crying sometimes when I was listening to Ruby's album and seeing her perform, right? Especially about the immigrant experience. And then I've been playing the album even for my mama, especially the ones with Waray in it. I was like, Ma, can you translate for this? But also, this is fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
And give it to my sister, especially about the song Us, right? About a song for brown women. And just to think like there was nothing like that. I mean, there are, I don't want to say nothing, maybe somebody, but in terms of the scope of it and the reach, the magnitude of it, the organized effort behind it as a significant release, this is very pivotal in, this will be what people will be writing about, even more so referencing your shit in like 10 years, looking at the impact of Asian American hip hop and Filipino American Pinay contribution to the culture and all. Yeah,
definitely.
Right? And who knows what the repercussions in terms of reverberations of her work will be from here. And
yeah, definitely. I definitely cried I've never cried so much at a rap show before. I cried at the album release. I cried when she did her Oakland stop at New Parish. And the interesting was I was able to get a space on the balcony for New Parish, the Oakland stop. And just watching the faces of all the audience members, kind of just their awe and their openness in absorbing everything Ruby was saying, it was amazing to see, because MC means, moving a crowd, right? Like, it's how you move a crowd that determines your kind of impact on the audience. But it was interesting to see that the crowd did not wave their hands, nor did they blink, nor did they speak, nor did they rap along, but that they were just staring and watching Ruby and absorbing everything. And then when the chorus came, they went crazy, right? And like, there is this different sense of, I think it's just different watching Ruby's shows in the way that people come to her to listen, And like, there are some shows you go to, turn up or whatever, and that's fun. But it's interesting to watch at Ruby's show specifically, the amount of people that are here just to listen and to absorb and to be in the moment with all the people around them, and then to party, of course. But the way that she commands her stories, it really draws in people's attention, and that's something that I found to be very distinctive in all her shows, is that people come to listen to her, and people come to, and I think there's a certain sense of acknowledgement of like, I relate to Ruby, I relate to her stories, I feel acknowledged, I feel affirmation being here with this room full of 100 other Pinays, right? There's a certain sense of acknowledgement there, and it's powerful. And I think that's why Us is so powerful, because it's an ultimate like power anthem, right? But then also being able to show up and be in the same room as everyone else making that music video, I think that brought it to a whole nother level. But yeah, I'm hoping to slip that into my next piece. So this is good brainstorming.
You know what I'm observing is you are good at observing and then basically writing about it. Like what you do. But at least in this instance, describing it and being clear about the different aspects of your observation, whether it be the physicality of people and the impact of the performance and all, right? And I guess that makes your strength as the writer come through, right? In terms of your observational ability and then being able to communicate that through right now in words, right? But being very clear about it and hitting the different aspects of it.
Thank you.
Right?
I try.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. And I guess that's what also makes your writing strong, right? Because being able to do that and place yourself back into the state of observation and then communicating that for other people. My question is, it seems you've written for your mama and then these other pieces. Do you write for yourself in the sense of your stories? Like, there's a difference in terms of writing, right, for analysis, which is beautiful. I'm not trying to take away from it, right? But do you write for yourself in that way?
I think these writings are how I write for myself. And the way I kind of look at it overall is I do a lot of like events and like projects, right? And I'm more behind the scenes. Some people don't know what I do. Sometimes I don't know what I do. And this writing is something that's for me specifically. So even if it is a retelling of something that I've seen or witnessed, this is for me. And this is something that I love, and that's how my love is expressed in hip hop, is to bear witness and to chronicle and to see where it can go and to continue pushing it, and so, I think writing poetry was fun. And when it turned into my research, I think that was another avenue of writing that I just took up that was also personal. So the cool thing about not writing this for academia is that I can insert as much or as little of my own experiences as I want to, right? And being in ethnic studies and Asian American studies and learning that it's okay to put your own narrative in your writing was really important for me to learn, because these experiences are not just my own, and it's not just the communities, but it's all together, right? Like I'm seeing myself in the changes and how those changes impact me and all these things. So it's not just it's not just about what I'm seeing, but this is really like, this is for me. It's for you, but it's also for me.
Yeah, I see it. I kind of understand it now, that when you do explain it, and that's a different perspective, at least from what I have been exposed, or my own approach to writing about me, right? Or from traditional stance of poetry, right? Of like, oh, hey, this is my story. These are my issues.
Right. Yeah. Just because it's not in first person doesn't mean it's not for me.
Damn, I never thought of it that way. That's very interesting. And that made me click. You are writing about things that are important to you and that have to be told.
Exactly.
And that you want to be seen at the limelight or at the forefront of our thinking. Oh, I just got a fucking mini epiphany type switch. I was like, what the fuck? How come I did not think about it that way? But that is dope. That is beautiful. And I guess that is the beauty of writing and allowing people of different styles or personalities to write what they want or to express themselves in an avenue that they would want, right? So it doesn't have to be like my type of poem, right? There are different ways to contribute and still put yourself in it.
Right.
And even your mama's story, that's you.
Yeah.
I mean, you were there as a baby, right?
Yeah.
So the real star of
as
that thing is the
supporting
baby.
Character.
Yeah. Everybody else, even your mama's supporting character to the baby that's being taken care of, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's dope. So you told me that you have writing that you just submitted to a publication. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my friend Shizu Sigel, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. If not, please correct me. She put together an anthology. I think it was funded by the California Arts Council or she got funding to put this book together, and it's an anthology. It's a collection of stories about San Francisco by San Franciscans. The writers who made submissions range from 14 to, late 60s. So it's a really multi-generational look at stories in San Francisco, and also, writers of color, particularly from San Francisco. So I made submissions for this anthology, and the Friscopinos the Native Immigrant and Shaking Earth will be being printed along with other folks' stories.
The Friscopino, the Shaking Earth.
Those two, specifically. Dope. I think because those two are more specifically to San Francisco. Yeah. So I'm very excited. It's my first kind of publication outside of, being a student, and so it's exciting, and being able to contribute to this collection of something that is so San Francisco at a time when we're experiencing all this gentrification and cultural loss in the city is, I think it's a really beautiful way of holding on to our city. Yeah,
that's dope.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a book.
Yeah, it's a book.
Oh,
I think it can be pre-ordered. I'll send you the link.
Okay, cool. For sure. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for giving your insight on all this. I'd like to end with a section, 3 pieces of advice. If you could think to your younger self, you're telling me about how you had issues in terms of even mental health that you had to work through younger, and then you found a space in the Filipino community. If you could think back to a younger self, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give, taking into account the route that you've gone through in terms of finding these spaces within Filipino American spaces, but also wanting to return and learn more back into your own, and then going through organizing spaces and whatnot?
1, be fearless. 2, don't second guess yourself. And 3, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
How does one be fearless?
I think that, and and not second guessing yourself kind of go hand in hand together. The fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being able to live up to other people's expectations, or any kind of fear that stops you from pursuing what it is that you want to pursue and what you really want to do. Those kinds of fears, because that makes you second guess yourself. And not and just having the confidence to know that what you believe, what you love, and if whatever speaks to you, then so be it.
What are ways, because sometimes it might be broad for someone to envision themselves as fearless, right? Or understand that that's a capacity. What has helped you come to those experiences of being able to face your fears? What are processes that have given you this ability to, all right, not always second guess yourself, but face these challenges head on?
I don't think it's so much of a, like, I'm gonna wake up one day and not be fearful anymore. It's a everyday, like, working, right? It's like, well, why? It's like, I went to this workshop and somebody said, pay attention to your own discomfort and ask yourself why. And that stuck with me, because then when I'm in situations where I feel scared to do something or say something, it's like, well, why are you scared? And it's in those smaller moments, internal moments, where I'm able to ask myself, well, what's stopping you? What is the fear that's stopping you? And would you still do it whether or not you had this fear, right? So it's a constant everyday, reminder of, to go for it, because time is not going to wait for us. But yeah, and then even around this writing, there is a general fear of, people not liking it or not accepting it, especially from folks who have been studying this, right? Being in academia for a really long time, you're kind of putting your work up for judgment. And I think I was just so obsessed with, is it going to be accepted, that I relied on so much validation from my professors and peers that I wasn't really writing it for myself anymore. And that's why I say this is for me. So yeah.
Fuck, I should just stop school, write my shit, fam. That's the advice. Don't listen to your professors.
No, but finish your program, though.
Finish your program.
We need you. Finish your program.
For sure. Thank you for coming on. Do you have anything you would want to leave folks who are listening with? Any thoughts? How can people get in contact with you as well?
The best way to reach me is through email. Or any social media. I'm on all the platforms. Any thoughts that I want to leave with folks? I'm really thankful to have people even reading it, because I know that it's a lot to ask for people to read lengthy things, and people may not be into reading as opposed to short, 5-minute videos or memes or things like that, right? So the fact that that people are actually,
you should make memes for your article so that it draws people in.
I think I'm gonna ask Steph for help with that one. But I'm just thankful that people are actually taking the time to read the stuff, and the feedback that I get in person. Sometimes we count on page clicks and view counts so much that when I actually do get feedback in person from people, like that's the important part for me, is that people are able to relate to it and enjoy it, and it's entertaining, and they can follow the story. Otherwise, it's like it's just out there, So I'm thankful for the support and the feedback that I've gotten so far, and I hope to continue doing it in a way that is critical and entertaining and easy to read, and that people can still look to later on. So,
have you ever done a collab write piece?
Other than a group project, no. No, not yet.
Not yet. So if somebody has ideas and they would like to throw it to you, would you be open for them to?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I love listening to people's ideas. So if anybody wants to work with me in any capacity for around hip-hop and Asian American artists, I'm open to everything.
Dope. That's hip-hop culture collab. Yeah. For sure. Thank you for coming on,
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.